Hello and welcome to C-Suite Secrets. I'm your host, Heather Parsons. I'm a serial entrepreneur, fractional CFO, and business strategist. I've spent years juggling a family and business while helping entrepreneurs scale, optimize cash flow, and build real financial success. On our show, we bring you real conversations with founders, executives, and operators that really move the needle in their business. No fluff, no filler, just smart strategy, systems that work, and insights that you can put to use right away. With that, let's dive in. Today we have Michael Contreras on the show, founder and president of Ensemble. Mike, welcome.
It's great to be here.
Thanks so much for being here. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey and how you became an entrepreneur and started your company.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, founded Ensemble in 2017. I founded it because basically I did a tour through the federal government prior to that, and I had a front seat for the launch of healthcare.gov. And at the time,
Wow.
the first iteration did not go so well. The platform had some issues that they were able to revamp and fix, but at that time, I that was kind of the inciting incident that led me to see that digital transformation was going to be a need or a pain point in the federal government for some time. So, as I considered like certain business ideas, that one stuck with me because it was an idea that I could bootstrap. Prior to that, I had plenty of other entrepreneurial ideas. Some were, SaaS platforms or algorithm development or, engineering services consulting. But, I ran into kind of scaling issues or market issues or, IP issues with those ideas. So, when I had the opportunity to start Ensemble, we focused in that IT modernization space.
I love that. And I love that you saw a need in the market and found a way to fill it. So, working with the government, I know there's a lot of stuff in the news today. And people are very curious about how it's truly impacting other businesses. I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey in working with the government and, how that's been impactful for your business and how that's changed over the years.
Yeah. So like I said, in 2017, late 2017 was when I launched the company. We won our first contract in 2018, our first prime contract with the Office of Naval Research and then NASA after that. And, we've worked with NASA, and we still hold a contract with the Navy, to this day. I think over that time, we've definitely evolved like our suite of services. We've moved from kind of being a niche provider of a specific like program management solution. It used to be called a prize challenge. We used to run prize challenges. Then we've kind of broadened our suite of offerings now to software and AI solutions, as well as a bit of marketing and digital advertising. And why we did that is because we could have been the kind of, number one prize challenge offering in the federal government, but we still would have been more or less a small business. But when we looked at what we do in a prize challenge, the different services that we were performing, they kind of bucketed themselves into that marketing piece, software development and program management. So today, we offer kind of the software and AI, as well as like that kind of program management staffing piece and a little bit of marketing as well. So to get back to your kind of original, question about, what is unique about this, time in the government, um, basically a lot of the budgets and the RFPs or the request for proposals or the, business development opportunities that have been forecasted prior to the new administration have essentially just been kind of like pushed back or refined or in some cases cut. So that's created a lot of uncertainty in the market, a lot of uncertainty for our clients, some real challenges for some of our clients. So we've had to be resilient and adapt and pivot. So, I'm grateful to still have a thriving company, and we might even grow still more this year. But others have not, you know, been so lucky. If you were a contractor supporting USAID, you probably are not really in operation at this point. Um, Thankfully, kind of NASA has more or less continued operations. There are some budget talks that could change the direction of the ship a bit, but at least the work that we're performing is still in demand, and our clients are still operating and still working with us.
It's good to hear that not everything is kind of completely changed, that certain things like NASA are still going, maybe not as planned, but they're still moving forward. I love hearing how you all are being resilient in this time. It's for me personally, I find that in business, there's always a curveball every few years that you don't necessarily anticipate. So, what are some of the things that you've done to kind of pivot and be resilient and continue to grow your company?
Yeah. So one thing is the data, like how you source your information can really help you make decisions. So you're probably aware of the uncertainty, in the government space, and that can be a little bit unsettling for employees. So what we kind of started to do in the about Q1, Q2 is, as a company, we kind of made the decision that, hey, like, let's like we can't be immune to the news, but let's go to the primary sources of information before we make key business decisions. So rather than kind of get riled up about articles in the news, let's just check in frequently with our clients. Let's just ask how they're doing, get their kind of feedback, and then make our decisions based on that, because you can definitely get yourself pretty anxious by looking at a lot of like the hearsay in social media, or even within kind of like secondary rumorville. But that was a key decision for us as a company, is to look at those, get close to our clients, and get those primary sources of information, walk the halls, talk to people, get out of the office, so to speak. Um, but in terms of resilience, once you have the good information, then you kind of have to strategize or take some actions, so that we can keep growing. So one of those plays that we made was to start pursuing more commercial work. We had always done a small amount of commercial work, mostly because the government work was stable and growing for us. So we didn't really have an incentive to build that kind of sales channel, so to speak. But it became more desirable this year, so that we could fill the gap for some contracts that we had, which were either ended prematurely or were canceled. So in order to kind of make up for that revenue shortfall, we've started to do more commercial work. And one of our key partners in our operating model is Upwork. So we're an Upwork enterprise partner, but that they're very key to allowing us to have a scalable freelancer delivery model. And one of the good things about Upwork is not only can you source talent on the platform, but you can also find work as well. So we've kind of inverted the kind of Upwork platform and started to kind of pursue opportunities through the platform as well. And one good thing about the commercial market is we could expand our talent pool beyond just the US, because the government requires a US based talent pool. So that's what we provide to the US government in terms of our service delivery. But the opportunity to use a global talent pool and pursue commercial opportunities is something that we've realized this year, just because of this market kind of issue and instability in the government space.
I think that's a great way to turn lemons into lemonade, and being able to use those extra, you know, that bigger talent pool. I know in the finance world, that's something that's very common, still have to have US based employees if you're going to work with the government, but there's so much qualified talent out there. I think it's great that you've been able to do that. You know, one question I have for you around that is, as you've been able to move into this flexible talent model, what have you done to kind of make it work without losing consistency on your work product?
Yeah, there's some risk whenever you're kind of working with new talent. So we've been a partner, an enterprise partner of Upwork, for about 5 years now. Well, we've used the marketplace since our inception, but enterprise partner for about four years, I think. And what's unique is every time you kind of hire a new person, you want to start small. You want to use deliverables or milestone-based payments, so that you can control the kind of risk, the delivery risk a bit. And Upwork and the platform allow you to do that fairly easily. It also allows you to manage payments. So when a deliverable is completed, the freelancer or the talent is paid immediately. And then all those kind of milestones are bundled into one payment to us at the end of the month. So that helps with cash flow as well. So, we've been able to kind of scale and control for delivery risk, by using the platform. But over time, we've started to work with the recurring talent. We almost have like a custom ensemble talent pool within, the broader marketplace of Upwork. So we found that we go back to similar people for kind of repeat type work. So over time, we've started to ameliorate the delivery risk even more. Going into the commercial space as we expand the talent pool, we're kind of doing that all over again, but we're using that same approach of like crawl, walk, run, right? Start small, test out, who you're working with, see if it works, and then gradually scale up from there.
I like that model. Being able to kind of base how you're interacting with folks on what they actually do, not what they say in an interview or what their credentials say, I think is really smart. And it gives entrepreneurs a chance to kind of test people out rather than taking on a full onboarding, doing all of the other things. If they use an outsourced model, kind of like an Upwork or working with other consultants, take some of that pressure and liability off rather than having the full time care and feeding of employees. I think that's really smart. I
Yep. Right.
love what
Yeah.
you
There.
also said about, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just gonna totally agree on that. And I think we've kind of borrowed a little bit of those insights, from other people, like other books and stuff, have talked about kind of this, like, testing talent before you kind of work with folks. I think, companies which are, slower to hire, have kind of better retention. But I do recognize that that's not always the case for high growth companies. Sometimes, you just gotta make a decision and adapt as best as you can. So, I once again, that's another plug, I think, just for like the freelancer approach is, it's not freighted with some of the regulatory compliance that a B2 employee would have. So you can make decisions quickly. And lots of times freelancers also have other work as well. So, you're kind of one project within a portfolio of work with a freelancer as well.
That's a really good point. So it sounds like it's not only good for, the person who's doing the hiring, but it's probably really good for the freelancer as well. I know, especially as we go to this, non-traditional workforce in a lot of ways. A lot of people don't want to be tied to one project all the time. They want to have different opportunities and work on different things. So I think it sounds like it's a win-win all around.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I think what we've found is if we can deliver really good work, like manageable work, exciting work with like a, specific scope, then we usually don't have a problem recruiting, people to perform that. Even people with like extremely high level of skill in a very specific area. I mean, so I can give you an example. We had a project from the USDA to build a data pipeline and a predictive AI algorithm to determine the biomarkers of cattle from video feed data. Well, there's also LiDAR as well. So we were, you know, considering how we could build this basically this setup where we could capture data in real time and upload it to the cloud so we could then start to create the algorithm. And we were searching on Upwork and we found a researcher in Texas near the feedlot, which we were going to be studying and videoing the cattle at. And she had performed kind of a similar setup, similar data capture and algorithm development exercise, but for swine, for pigs. So this was,
Wow.
like pretty needle in a haystack, but you know, these types of scenarios have happened again and again for us. So yeah, it worked great. She helped us, capture the data and clean the data and make sure that the data could be used to develop the algorithm.
Wow. That is like finding a needle in a haystack. That's a very niche set of skills there and a location as well.
Yep.
So I know you mentioned working with the USDA. I saw that you've also worked with NASA and the CDC. So, what's one lesson that you've learned about leading complex projects and dealing with that level of government that you think every entrepreneur should know?
Government is pretty bureaucratic, so things are not going to move as fast as you might anticipate. So patience, I guess, has been a lesson that I've learned quite a bit. But also it really does in my experience in working with the government and bureaucratic environments, it really does put an emphasis on the team and the people dynamics because the machine is not really going to work super efficiently. You could make the analogy of like being on a ship or something. It takes a whole crew to operate a ship. It turns slowly, but it turns, if everybody works together. So that was one of the insights too about starting Ensemble is there was this, dynamic of like creating a really good team. And if we could, be easy to work with, be flexible and easy to work with, and have like that customer obsession, if you will, then we could really have big impacts, in the federal government. So, if I could emphasize anything, it's, the teamwork and that client centricity, that client focus, that customer obsession, which really drives outcomes for the government. And, one of the reasons why we're able to kind of deliver all these different services is because we can bring that talent to the table that's easy to work with and work within a complex environment.
That's great. I think that's a wonderful point around both being patient and knowing that your timeline is a little bit longer than it may be for folks on the commercial side, as well as being flexible and easy to work with. I know that's definitely a dynamic environment that's always changing. So I think that's really smart. One other question that I have around that, we all know that the government comes with a lot of red tape. So, what have you done from a cash flow management perspective to kind of plan some of that out and make sure that you don't have cash flow constraints along the way?
Yes, the government is fairly slow in a long sales cycle. So the first step to the cash flow management is really making sure that your operational costs are, fairly manageable as you build up the pipeline and the book of business. After you kind of understand how the government buys, the one benefit is that it's in most years, in normal years, the government is fairly predictable. They're one of the few entities that forecasts what they're going to buy like years in advance. So they'll tell you what they're going to buy, maybe 24 months in advance, so you can prepare. Um, the other thing I'd say with, managing the cash flow is that in the government is that you'll often work with partners because the government will put out a request for services, and oftentimes one vendor can't deliver everything. So you have to team up together. So, you might have a niche offering. Um, and then you might team up with a larger integrator or vice versa. You might be a small business that is fronting or priming the opportunity and a large business is backing you. Or maybe there's three or four partners on the opportunity. So in terms of cash flow though, payment terms are pretty key. If you're the prime, you definitely want to have like pay when paid payment terms if you can. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to pay your subs, but you haven't been paid yourself because that puts a lot of cash flow pressure on the prime. So payment terms become really key when working with partners. The pipeline is fairly slow, but once you start to win contracts, the government also gives you multi-year contracts, which don't usually happen as much in the commercial space. So you might get a 10-year contract with the federal government, and that kind of backlog is fairly predictable. So that's another benefit of government contracts from a cash flow perspective is that the backlog is a good indicator of future revenue, and banks understand that. So there are, a group of banks, both regional and now even national kind of banks, which will take backlog into account when sizing a line of credit or when considering you for a line of credit. So um, we've been able to take advantage of that and get a line of credit with JP Morgan Chase to manage some of the cash flow issues that happen when you're waiting for milestones or waiting for government to pay. That being said, we haven't had huge issues with government paying us after invoice. I think we average like 22 days or so in terms of getting paid. So that's really good. And we have for the most part gotten paid. And backlog has been a predictor for us in almost every year except this year. But um, overall, the government is a slow customer, but once you're in, it's a good customer and very predictable.
That sounds great. And one of the things that you touched on there that I think is important for all entrepreneurs is that line of credit. I know not everyone's a huge fan of debt, but I'm a huge fan of smart debt. And I think having that line of credit that's there and ready and available before you need it is a key for any entrepreneur. That way, you're not caught in a bad situation where you have to ask for money and accept payment terms that are not ideal or get into deals that aren't in your best interest.
Right? Yeah, I think
One
we've
other, oh,
even,
go ahead.
during normal years, you can create, a pretty decent size cash reserve as well. If you're doing your kind of revenue forecasting and kind of cost management appropriately. Um, we've been able to do that in most years to supplement even the flexibility that the line of credit offers as well. So yeah, that's another benefit to having the government kind of those government contracts.
For sure. And having that reserve set aside, that way you're not spending everything that you earn is key on growing and being able to hire more employees. Um, and I also believe that having a plan around what you're going to do with some of that stuff, whether it's just sitting on the sidelines for a rainy day or a what if situation, or doing growth or whatever that is, I think that's really smart to have funds set aside so that you're always prepared.
Yep, absolutely.
As you're managing your finances and other pieces of the business, what are some of the metrics that you find most valuable for your day to day operations?
So I'll kind of divide up the answer into like normal or nominal years, base case years versus this year. So in a regular year, Ensemble we operate, we use the traction method for KPIs. We kind of defined a 10-year vision. We looked at where we should be in terms of like a revenue number of clients perspective at 3 years. And then we look at like how we can make annual goals that ladder up to the 3 and the 10-year vision. And then from those kind of annual goals, those get flowed into all the kind of managerial level performers at Ensemble through the KPIs in your performance review. So we kind of share the vision for the company through our key performance indicators. Some things we've looked at on the sales side, we've tracked kind of a bookings target. We've also incentivized weighted pipeline as well. So looking at generating weighted pipeline or looking at targeting a ratio of weighted pipeline to operational cost. On the delivery side, we've looked at the net contribution of those projects to the bottom line of the business and trying to hit a target there. We use the on-target earnings approach where we set a target, and then based on performance throughout the year, the employee receives a commission on that progress toward the target. And if you exceed the target, then you get some accelerators, so there's incentive to outperform or overperform as well. Financials, as we've kind of grown, profit and EBITDA has become more important. So we've looked at targeting specific margins as well. So striving for double-digit margins, better than double-digit, is incentivized appropriately. And then we've even looked at, for like directors in a new space, where we're trying to kind of land net new business in it or with a new offering. We've looked at, kind of binary targets like, number of SOWs kind of negotiated or sent out, with new customers. So that's a smattering of the gambit of things that we've looked at. This year, I'd say what's paramount for us is that ratio of weighted pipe to operational cost, because that's a leading indicator for if we're going to have enough money in the future. So we look at like our 1 year weighted pipeline and our 1 year look ahead for operational costs. And ideally, we want like 2.5 times coverage there because, weighted pipeline, who knows? It's all probabilistic. Maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't. So you want some margin there. And then we do cash flow forecasting. So we do a quarterly cash flow forecast. And then this year we have a cash flow forecast through the end of the government fiscal year as well, just because, things are just more uncertain than usual.
I think that's really smart. Sounds like you're tracking a lot of great metrics there and really trying to move the needle in your business, even though it may have changed and some of those directions may look a little different. One
Yep,
final question that I have for you before we wrap up. I'd
sure.
love to hear what's one secret that you wish you would have known before you became an entrepreneur?
Hmm. I'll have to think about this. Well, a lot of folks, I guess one thing I wish I would have known is maybe the importance, sales. I think, being a technologist early in my career, I did a Ph.D. in structural dynamics, so I really went down the rabbit hole in terms of, um, you know, knowledge in a specific area and wanting to solve a very specific problem. And I did that because I felt that I could, invent some, new concept or device that could create a business opportunity, right? So I was very like product focused. But what I realized is oftentimes, you might have a great product, but you don't have a viable market, a viable sales channel. So, I think earlier on, I eventually I realized that I had some gaps in that area, and I sought specific experiences to kind of get better at sales. But earlier on, I think it would have been helpful to kind of have that experience.
That's great to hear. I think sales is something that I don't think most entrepreneurs get into business focusing on. I know I definitely didn't. I have a master's degree in accounting, and sales was one course that wasn't really involved there. So it's good to hear somebody else saying the same thing. And, but we all find a way to make it work. And it sounds like you're doing just fine doing that.
Yeah, I think I think I've read this somewhere, but I think usually like the end goal of every career progression, is sales. You make partner at any company and
Yep,
like you go sell work, right? But there's not a lot of I think sales is something that you just have to do. That's the weird thing is like you can read all the books and take the classes you want, but it's just something that you got to do to refine. Um, so yeah, I think that part, uh, if anybody's like, hasn't heard that message by now and you're in entrepreneurship, it's a good time to start working on your sales game.
for sure. Well, this conversation's been great. I definitely appreciate it. So, if folks want to learn more about what you're doing or connect with you, what's the best way they can reach out?
Sure. Yeah, you can check out our website at ensembleconsultancy.com. We're also on X and LinkedIn. We're on X at Ensemble DC, and then we're also on LinkedIn as well. You can just search Ensemble Consultancy. And, by all means, you can reach out to us through our website, and we're happy to connect.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you have found today's conversation as valuable as I have, be sure to hit that like and follow button. And if you're looking for more business tips and conversation between episodes, feel free to check us out on Facebook at C Suite Insiders. Until next time, keep growing. And remember, you don't have to do this alone.